Hey everyone, welcome to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We're coming to you as always courtesy of our broadcasting partner moretalk.tv. Joining me today on the show, I welcome back Carol Ann Liaros. For over 40 years, Carol has been a professional psychic, lecturer, workshop presenter, and author. She has appeared on international TV, hundreds of radio shows. She's been in the movie Inner Spaces and has been a speaker and mentor for Edgar Cayce's A.R.E. for more than 25 years. She has worked for business leaders, psychotherapists, senior corporate executives, health organizations, spiritual groups, and churches, designing workshops, meditations, and innovative psychic techniques, intuitive programs, and more. She is a feature presenter for the upcoming A.R.E. conference entitled You Are a Psychic, a step-by-step course for advancing your intuitive potential. And this is in September. It's the 25th through the 27th here in Virginia Beach at the A.R.E. You can register for this conference and any other conference offered here at the A.R.E. in Virginia Beach by visiting our website at edgarcayce.org/conferences. Carol, thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce.
Well, it's my pleasure. I was looking forward to it very much.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you on. I was wondering, I wanted to kind of start off with your upcoming presentation at the A.R.E. conference. This one is in September 25th through the 27th this year. And it's entitled You Are Psychic, a step-by-step course for advancing your intuitive potential. And can you give us a brief description of what conference attendees can expect from your presentation?
Yes, well, behind everything that I do, I design the techniques so that people can experience, recognize, respect, and apply their psychic or intuitive skills in their everyday life to help themselves as well as others. And it goes along very much with what Edgar Cayce stressed so much, which was service, service to self and to others. And so by experiencing, recognizing, and respecting, and then applying their psychic skills, people can help themselves in many different ways in their everyday life, from relationships to investments to their spiritual life. Everything, there's not an area of our lives that we cannot apply our psychic, intuitive skills, along with our intellect too, of course. And so we can help ourselves, but we also can help others in many, many different ways. And so when I first came across the Edgar Cayce material back in 1965, that I read the first book, I was so impressed with that it was service to others, because I had, seen many psychics, been to some psychics, and it seemed that some of them were more interested in entertaining or being the star of the show rather than, okay, this is a gift that you have. What are you doing with it? And to me, the good news is, yes, it's a gift that these psychics had, but the good news is that we all have the gift, which I discovered. I didn't believe that many years ago, but it became very obvious to me shortly after I discovered I could do these things, that we all have the gift, and that's really good news.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's right in line with Cayce. Cayce's, one of his big things was that everybody has this psychic potential. You just have to put in the time and effort to get to know it. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
To recognize it, because many people don't recognize it or discount it in some way, saying, oh, that was just my imagination, or why did I see that, or why did I feel that, and so on. So in a workshop where you are paired off with another person and you are given instructions into the kind of information to go after about this other person, because that's how I do it. I guide them through it to keep the focus on what the intent is. And so by then using your imagination, which I stress very much because it feels like imagination to most of us, and then getting the feedback from the person. Without the feedback, it's just, did I do well? Did I do poorly? Was it my imagination? So by getting feedback from that individual, it helps people to really begin to pay attention to what they see or hear or feel or just know about, a situation or another person and so on. And also by being in a workshop like this and getting that feedback, they begin to get a very good picture of are they more clairvoyant? In other words, do they tend to see things psychically, or do they tend to feel things, or do they tend to hear things, or just know things? And that gives them a lot of information to pay attention to in the future in their everyday life. And it even goes beyond that, because they quickly discover the areas, most people discover that the areas that they're really interested in is the areas where they are most accurate. The areas where they're not so interested, they may be less accurate or not accurate at all. For example, when I go to, say, Virginia Beach, and someone picks me up in their vehicle, when I get to the hotel, and if someone would say, what color was the vehicle that you came here in, I wouldn't know, because I don't pay any attention to that. I'm not interested in that. So in a psychic reading, if someone said, what color is my vehicle, I would say, I don't know, because I'm not interested in that.
Right.
So the tendency is to be more accurate in areas that we're most interested in, and that's something I've noticed.
Excellent. And what sort of things can a conference attendee expect to learn? I know you talked about you have such an experiential workshop that you present, that you've kind of created your own unique form of this. What do you expect them to learn, and what do you hope that what skills do you hope they take away?
Well, what I expect them to learn, or what they can expect to learn, is the fact of what is the difference between an actual psychic or intuitive impression, no matter how it comes, whether it's visual or feeling or hearing or knowing, the difference between an accurate impression and their imagination or a guess, etc. Because I have them pay attention to, all right, let's say it's visual, and I'll say, okay, now close your eyes, and you're just getting that impression right now visually. Where are you seeing it? And, like most people, they didn't pay any attention. And they'll say, well, I'm sort of seeing it in my head, in my mind's eye, like maybe in the middle of my forehead. And so I'll then take them to the most inaccurate statement they made about their partner, and I'll have them close their eyes and say, okay, now it's just happening. You're just getting it for the very first time now. Where do you see that? And what they discover is that they will see a psychic or intuitive impression in a different way than they see the guess or, imagination or whatever you want to call it. It might be in a different place in their head. It might have to do with the vividness or the lack of vividness. Some people, the psychic impression is more vivid. Other people, the psychic impression is much less vivid. It's almost fuzzy. So they learn those kinds of things about how their own psychic ability works. I can share how mine works, but I only use that to sort of guide them into recognizing that everybody's works differently. And so by pairing off with a partner, getting them feedback, calling their attention to those things, they learn a lot about their own psychic ability so they can rely on it as a useful tool, combined with their intellect too, of course, in their everyday life. So I hope they go away with that, and I hope they, my hope is that they learn to respect their psychic ability, because so many times people have come from a community or a family where people have, made very disparaging remarks about it. Oh, you're saying that again, or you're reading that book again, or you think you're psychic, and they're very discounting. And so people tend to lose confidence. So by learning more about how their own abilities work, getting feedback from someone else, they begin to see they're much more accurate than maybe they ever suspected, and they gain that confidence. Therefore, they respect this quality within them. Like we respect our intellect, they'll respect their psychic ability or their intuition. So I hope they go away, with that, and recognizing that everyone is psychic. We all have it to different degrees. It's that simple.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned earlier that even when you kind of first got involved with your tapping into your own intuition, your own psychic abilities, you were unsure whether or not you had the ability to do that. So I'm curious in asking that, do the conference attendees need to have any previous experience to be prepared to attend the conference?
No, they can come if they've never had a psychic experience in their life. I think they will discover that being in an atmosphere of this very safe, sane, grounded place and techniques, that they will discover that they actually do have psychic ability. If they know they do, they've had different experiences and it's told them that, it can help them focus and, how can I say that? When they have a need to know information, they can learn how to then access their psychic ability, their intuition. And if they're very experienced, what I've found that in many of my workshops, many psychics come in to learn more about their own ability, because some of them were taught in the beginning, or they learned to function that way, of just opening up, we'll say. These words are so inadequate, but we have to use them. Opening up and letting anything come in about the situation or the person, where my method of teaching is to have them focus on specific information so that, for example, if they own a business and they want to hire someone, and they have, several resumes in front of them and they all look good, how to focus in and ask themselves questions about these people who've applied for this position that maybe you couldn't ask because of legal things, or the person wouldn't know themselves. For example, one of the questions a business owner might ask themselves is, will this person fit in with the rest of the staff? Well, neither one of them know that. However, they can access that information with their intuition. They might want to ask themselves a question like, will this person stay with us, or am I going to invest a lot of money and time in this person, and in 6 months they're going to, take off and go somewhere else? So by learning that focus, first of all, the intent. What is your intent when you tune into this person or this situation? Do you want to know if they're going to be a good employee for you? That's your intent. And then you focus on that intent. And you won't get other information about that individual that you're not interested in. You're not interested in, they're going to break up with their significant other, or they're going to move to a new apartment or whatever. You're not interested in that. You have specific information you want to get about a situation or a person. So even the psychics who are professionals tell me that they learned a lot in the workshops because of that intent and focus, and then we practice that, and they're very happy about that. So no matter what level, if you will, of experience or lack of experience they've had, this workshop is for them.
Excellent. And you talked about how you can kind of apply these psychic and intuitive abilities in the workplace. And I know you have many years of experience working with a number of corporate executives and business leaders, but I'm curious, what sort of intuitive practices are you teaching that can be applied directly in the workplace with these corporate executives and business leaders?
Now, you're talking about the what I did in corporations, or what we'll be doing in the workshop that fits with that?
Like within corporations over the years, what sort of practices do you teach them that they can apply in the workplace? Because I know our listeners would love to be familiar with some of the practices that you're teaching. Yes.
Well, one of the things that I learned very early on in this field, back in 1966 when I first got, involved and so on, I learned very quickly to pay attention to the language that I use when I'm speaking to a group or an individual, because I cannot use the same language with someone who's been in the Cayce material for many years, for example, as I would use with a corporate executive who, at the words aura and psychic and remote viewing and things like that, they would just cringe and not be able to hear what I have to say. So what I did in the corporate arena was I asked several friends of mine who were in the corporate world what are the buzzwords? What are the words? What is the language? What is the language they speak in the corporations? And so I quickly found that I could adapt my psychic language, if you will, to the corporate language, and so they could hear what I had to say. And so by saying things, if I were to use precognition, that definitely would not have flown. That would not have, I would have been shown the door. Let's put it that way. But if you use words, and I heard them in the corporations quite a bit, was, hearing the hoofbeats of what's coming. Now, it's exactly the same thing, but it seems to be corporate speak. When I would they would ask, well, we have these two executives who are not getting along. We'd like you to talk to them, so on, and then tell us, how we can help them get along better because they're heads of divisions and they're sabotaging one another, and so on. So I would then say, well, my report, my analysis of Mr. A is this, and my analysis of Mr. B is this, and this is why they don't get along. And so my conclusion is, now they never, interestingly enough, they never asked me when I said my analysis, they never asked me what kind of analysis I used. So I don't know what I would have said. That would have probably stopped me in my tracks for a minute or two. And so they got the impression that I was a psychologist. I never said it. If someone had asked me, I would have said, no, absolutely not. I was introduced as a creativity consultant, but they somehow got the impression I was a psychologist. Then the other things that we taught them was how to relate in the techniques we used to each other instead of, executive vice president of imaging and executive vice president of engineering, instead of looking at the individual with those glasses on, how to look at the individual as a person. And so when we could get them to relate to each other as people rather than positions, which we found very easy to do, they found that things changed. They didn't sabotage one another. They actually helped one another. $1-million lawsuits were settled because of advice that I gave to one executive vice president about how to approach the person from this other company where there was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit pending and had been for a couple of years. And so by applying intuition, you discover that you don't approach every person the same way because that person is different physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually than the next person. So by tuning into them and finding out who they are and what they're about, you can communicate with them and move faster. And so a lawsuit was settled in an office, shaking hands, because of a report on what this person really is looking for. Right. So things like that. I remember I must have been a school teacher in a past life because I was in the boardroom of this Fortune 10 corporation, and they're the executives, the executive vice presidents, all males, in, their, $3,000 suits and so on. And I said, okay, I'd like you to pair off, find someone in the group and stand next to them. And they did that. And I said, all right, now I want you to sit down on the floor. And there was this dead silence. Like, did I hear her right? She couldn't possibly be saying that. And so in my school teacher voice, as I say, I said, sit down on the floor. Well, I know that, in school, or years ago anyway, they're taught to respond to the teacher. So they sat down on the floor, and I said, okay, now decide who's going to be A and who's going to be B. And they decided, and I said, okay, A, you're going to be the storyteller, and B, you're going to be the story listener. And so B, I want you to lay down on the floor. And again, there was this dead silence. Nobody moved. I said, B, lay down on the floor. So they did. And so then I said, okay, I want you to tell your partner a story about a dog you had when you were very, very young. Well, knowing what we do about the brain, we know that those early memories are there. And by having two executives who only have related as position to position, I now began to have them tell stories about their early life. And that changed the whole attitude they had toward each other, because they each were storytellers and each story listeners. And so that proved out in the cooperation then between the different divisions and so on. And so we were very popular in the corporate arena. So by tuning into someone like we're going to in the workshop, what do you need to know about this person so you can improve your relationship with them? Maybe it isn't going so well. But by tuning into them and seeing their heart and what's really in their heart and what's in their mind and what's in their soul, not just the behavior that you see on the outside, a deeper understanding occurs. And you find that maybe words you're using push buttons in them, so you change the words a little bit. What is the real reason that they're avoiding you? Maybe it has nothing to do with you, but it has more to do with the fact you remind them of someone from their past who hurt them in some way. So you gain these tremendous heart insights into other people, allowing you to get along better with the people around you. And so it has so many applications in life. People work very hard for the money they earn, and they're investing it maybe in the home they're living in, or maybe they do the stocks, or whatever, by using the intuition in tandem with the intellect. You have the data about that stock. Now, how do you feel about how's it going to do? Is it going to go up? Oh, okay. If so, when? Because that's important. And so if you learn to recognize and honor and respect your intuition, then you can apply it in these ways. Because in the workshop, you've seen again and again, pairing off with different people, where you're accurate, what it feels like, or where you see it. And so you gain that confidence to use it in the different areas in your life. Did I get off track, or did I answer your question?
No, that was wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And that's great. I mean, it's so important that these intuitive practices are highly applicable in the business world, and you've very wonderfully shown that, so thank you. I do want to move on. I know we talked a bit about your upcoming conference, and that's going to be here in Virginia Beach at the A.R.E. That's in September, the 25th through the 27th. But I understand also that you have a book that's scheduled to be released in September as well, and this is through the A.R.E. Press. And this book is entitled Unlocking Your Intuition, 7 Keys to Awakening Your Psychic Potential. And I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about how this book came about?
Well, what I was interested in, or what people were interested in, is how to take this information from a workshop, like let's say a weekend workshop like this. How do I take that home? And I'd like to introduce it to my A.R.E. study group, or some group they were involved in. How can I do that? So I wrote this book. So it's a step-by-step guide. Someone could take this book, take it back to a group. There's a script in it on how to do psychometry, how to do remote viewing, how to do this and that. But it's not just a description. It actually, let's say, I was taking it back to where I come from. And I took the book, and I said, okay, now we're going to use this. And as the leader of the group, I would say, okay, now everyone close your eyes and relax. And there's the relaxation technique in there, step by step. I mean, I've even written it so it says, now close your eyes and hesitate. Okay, now tense up every muscle in your toes, hold, relax. And there's even the space to let you know when to allow that to happen. Then it goes into psychometry. It gives a description of psychometry, and then it takes you again step by step, just as if I were standing in front of the group, leading it. The same amount of time and hesitation, what they do the next time, so everyone could have their eyes closed and follow it. And then there are different chapters in it, too. One of them is called Psychometrics, which over the years I have developed these, I call them structures. Henry Reed is the one who gave it the title of Psychometrics. For example, if someone says, when will I sell my home? If I don't get an answer, and that does happen, if I don't get an answer, what I do is in my imagination, I pretend I see this bar, and I label that bar time. And then I will make it a year's time. In my imagination, I'll see it divided into 12 sections. And then holding that question in my mind from the left, which is where we would be the day they asked the question, I would move that figure along with the question, when will they sell their house? And wherever it stopped, I would then judge, okay, it's about halfway down that bar. The bar is 12 months. So I would say, you're going to sell your home within 6 months. And so I have developed these, what I call structures, and what Henry Reed called psychometrics, so that people can use these kinds of imaginary tools to access the information from their unconscious, which is where they know the answers. And so I've, done things like, traffic lights. Should I do X? And if the traffic light is red, of course, no. If it's yellow, proceed with caution. If it's green, go ahead. So I have about, I've forgotten, maybe 12 or so in there of these structures that people can then use in their imagination to access information. So that's in the book also. All kinds of information to help people be able to utilize this in a way with groups, with themselves, and so on. So I figured that it could be a helpful aid for people who can't come to the beach even.
Right, absolutely. Well, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. We definitely look forward to that in September. I'm curious, I noticed over the years with this show that a lot of our listeners are kind of just coming to the Cayce material for the first time and getting to discover all that the readings offer. You being a teacher and student of the Cayce material for so many years now, what is it about the A.R.E. and the Edgar Cayce readings that make them such an important part of your life's work?
Well, first of all, I have found that there's no dogma. There's no, you must do this in order to proceed on the spiritual path or whatever, however you would describe that. And so there's a very broad view of life. It encompasses life in a much, the readings that came out of Edgar Cayce really showed us what life is really like on the physical level, on the, whatever you want to call these other levels of consciousness, always stressing the importance of balance. Yes, we pay attention to our intuition, our psychic ability. We learn how to have techniques to access that, but that is not the end-all and the be-all. We have spiritual life, too, and we have a material life, too, that we need to participate in. So it's very much about balance, and it's very much about service to others in whatever way you can be of service to others. My children, way back, because they are certainly older now, but my children went to the A.R.E. camp for children. My one daughter, my oldest daughter, was having psychic experiences and felt different than the other kids in her class, in school, and her friends and so on. And so by going to the camp, she discovered that other children were experiencing these psychic things, were having psychic dreams, were, being able to talk to animals and hear the animals talk back to them and so on. So my two daughters went to the Edgar Cayce camp. Then when they became adults, my daughter sent her children to the A.R.E. camp, her two daughters. And now they have children, and so they have gone to the camp. It's for children. Now there's family camp too, so everyone could go together. So I find that it builds community. It builds community in the family, and it builds community in the community, and in the nation, and in the world, and so on. So I think it's a place where people can feel safe, and any of the I don't like to use the word techniques, but that's what we use. Any of the techniques that people who are teaching workshops and so on are very safe. They're very grounded in the Cayce material. The fact of reincarnation, many people tell me that in their particular religion, it is not accepted. In fact, it is greatly rejected. And they may remember past lives, and so they feel, again, comfortable. They feel welcomed. They feel the non-judgmentalness of the material. And then when we get to the Cayce material that has to do with the diagnosing and prescribing, I mean, that is life-saving. And so it's so all-encompassing that just about anybody, I would think, could fit into the material. And the fact that this man was, what's the word I'm looking for? Skeptical of his own abilities, and then when reincarnation came in, past lives came in, he had to step back and look at that. So it shows that he wasn't just, jump in with both feet, and I believe anything that comes out of my mouth when I'm, in that state, because people feel that way, so they can relate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest things with the Cayce materials. He was such a humble, approachable man that truly stuck to his morals and his ideals of I need to be of service, and my life needs to be all about being of service.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely true, and that is really appealing to everyone. And the fact that you're not doing it from the ego place, you're doing it from a open heart chakra, which means you're doing it with compassion and love, and not because you want to look great.
Right, absolutely. And you mentioned a little bit about your personal story with your children. I'm curious, how important to you is it to raise children with this intuitive sense, this intuitive focus, to have that perspective of there's more than just the physical and what's around you physically. There's this whole inner world that you need to be in touch with that is essential for your health.
Well, in viewing my own family, my own children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and of course giving readings and doing workshops and so on, the contrast between children who do not have this experience and information and those who do is very night and day. When someone dies in our family, for example, of course we feel, sadness and we'll miss them and that kind of thing. But to have your child stand there, in the funeral home or wherever, and say, "Oh, there's Grandpa. He's standing at the end of the casket, and he looks happy." Little things like that don't seem like much, but they're very, very important. I remember when my daughter, I think it was Marina, came home from school one day, and I don't know if it's kindergarten, first grade, but she was young. And she said, "Mom, Mary had a headache, and her mother gave her an aspirin." She said, "What's an aspirin?" So we learned to use, other ways of healing the body, whether it be homeopathy or Bach flower remedies or acupuncture or chiropractic and, so on. And so here we have, I speak for my family, okay? Here I have a family that's very healthy because, in my opinion, it's because we follow the material spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, using the castor oil packs and all the other things that Cayce recommended. And so it makes life, for me, I will speak for myself, healthier, very different, very, very different than others. I mean, I have my granddaughter call me up and say, "Grandma, I had a dream last night. Tell me about it." And so, we'll work together on her dreams. She was afraid of flying. And when she did fly, she would call me up and say, Grandma, I want you to check, flight number, so-and-so, this and that. And then I showed her how to do it herself. So she felt safe getting on that plane. And she knows that if she ever gets a feeling, or however it comes to her, not to get on it, she won't get on it because she has that confidence in me and her own abilities. And so it enriches life. To make a simple statement, it enriches the life in ways that, other people see us as ending at our skin. We don't. Other people might see that death ends, like, everything. It doesn't. Other people may say, well, I have to take this poison into my body because the doctor says so. We don't go there first. Right across the board, anything you can think of.
Right. Well said, absolutely. And I'm curious, as a teacher of just psychic and intuitive abilities for so many years, have you found that there's any pattern of, I guess the best way to put this, what is the biggest difficulty that you see with your conference attendees and the people who attend your workshops? What's the biggest difficulty they have in accessing their intuitive psychic ability?
Relaxing. So many people come into, this is a very hectic world we live in, and many people have a job and a family, and, maybe they even have a parent who is suffering from Alzheimer's, something. So people come in with a lot of tension, a lot of physical tension, mental tension, emotional tension, and so on. And so to relax and turn inward, so to speak, it's hard for many people. So before I do have them enter an experience, I go through the relaxation of the body, tensing, relaxing the muscles. And then you have some people who are very, very, they let their intellect get in the way. They'll say, well, yes, I picked up this about her, but I could tell by the look in her eyes, or I could tell by the color of her sweater, or I don't know what. And so I tell them, if you find your intellect talking you out of your experience, go to the literature, because there's over 100 years, well over 100 years of ad nauseum research that's been gone on to prove these things are realities. And so if you satisfy your left brain, which, saying yes, but, you will then allow yourself to experience that. And then there's some people who are fearful. They just can't let go and become involved in the experience because of fear. And I found that the fear sometimes comes because they had a very, what to them was a frightening experience when they were younger. Maybe their grandmother appeared at the end of their bed, and they found out the next day their grandmother died in the middle of the night, and somehow as a child they think they killed her. Or that very fact scares them, or they were raised in a very fundamentalist home where they were taught that this is the work of the devil, and it's the devil giving you this information, and so on. And they don't intellectually believe that anymore. However, emotionally they react to it and they shut it down. And so I help them with reprogramming those old tapes, for example. So it's different things with different people.
All right, Carol, I know you also co-authored a book with Kevin Todeschi, the CEO of the A.R.E. And I'm curious,
Yes.
This book is entitled Edgar Cayce on Auras and Colors. And I love this book personally because it's such a topic that people are really drawn to. They want to know, everyone kind of just wants to know how to see people's auras. They know something that was talked about in Cayce's life. It was an ability that he had, and he talked about its ability that everybody has the potential to I guess, harness this psychic and intuitive ability. And this book entitled Edgar Cayce on Auras and Colors that you co-authored with Kevin Todeschi, I'm curious personally, how did this book come about, and what can readers expect to take away from it?
Well, I received a call from Kevin one day, and he said that the publishers wanted him to write a book on auras. And he said he would, but if he could co-author it with me, because he knows that, for example, in my other book, I have that step-by-step on how to see auras. And he knew that it had happened with the work I was doing with the blind, that even though some of the blind people had partial vision, Some had no vision, not even light perception. Some of the children, blind children, had glass eyes, and yet they were seeing auras, and they were seeing them accurately, in colors and picking out physical problems and so on and by. So Kevin asked if I would write the book with him, and so I said, I'd be delighted because, I've known Kevin for like 30 years, and he's a delight to work with. So we worked together on it, and what it has in there is the description of how to see auras. There is also a section on, a very fundamental, what the different colors mean. So if someone is seeing the aura, they can tell what the colors mean, how to interpret the colors, although some of them, actually, quite often, if you use your logic in many of these things in the psychic arena, if you use your logical mind, you'll find that you have the answers. For example, when you see this, if you look at the aura and you see this red shooting out of a person's neck, well, what's one of our favorite sayings? I was so angry I saw red. So what does that tell you? I feel blue today. So if you see this blue with sort of a grayish tinge to it, it's logical that they're feeling a little depressed today. If it's very gray over the blue, that means that thing they're depressed about has been with them a long time. Maybe, a child died 6 months ago, or a spouse or something. So, so if you use your logical mind, what do we say when someone is very intelligent? We say, he's very bright. Well, around the head, when someone is very bright, it's bright yellow. So some of it you just apply your logical mind and you can figure out what the colors mean. If you see brown in the aura, for example, with other colors too, of course, that would indicate someone very grounded, probably good in business, that kind of thing. So applying some logic along with some hints, some instructions on how to see the auras, it's very easy. It's very easy. Now, some people tend to be, of course, more visual than others. They just are naturally. That's how they came in. And so they may feel the auras rather than see them so easily. And they feel the impact of the aura on them. And a lot of people experience that. So it really is, again, a how-to book. I'm very interested in how-to books.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know people people really take to those. Absolutely. People need somebody there to walk them through it step by step. So I know that's a wonderful tool that you've offered. Carol, I want to kind of end on a question here that I really like to ask my guests who come on the show, especially one like yourself who's been so kind of intimately involved with the A.R.E. and the Cayce work for so many years now. And that question is, where do you see the Cayce work and the A.R.E. as we move into the future, maybe 5, 10, even 15 years down the line? What role do you see the A.R.E. and the Cayce material playing?
Well, I don't know the word to describe it, but what I see is like a hub. Here's a place that it can be and is fastly becoming having the cutting edge on the latest research going on in parapsychology, the latest research going on in the brain, the latest research going on in spiritual, practices and so on. And so as a hub, with these streams of energy going out over the globe, where, the streams of energy connect with people who want and need and are aware of the information, where do they get it? And so their questions and their energy stream into the A.R.E., and then the A.R.E. streams out with the where to get this information, what books to order, what workshops to take, whatever. So I see that as a constantly evolving unit of energy is the only way I can describe it. Right now, in my opinion, Kevin Todeschi, as the CEO of the A.R.E., is very much a visionary. I've known Kevin for many years, and my observation of him is how visionary he is. He doesn't just see a year ahead or a year ahead. He sees into the future. both psychically and as a visionary with practical plans, practical things to put into place to make those things happen. So I feel that the ARE is experiencing a rebirth, if you will.
Absolutely. And you raised some great points there. I think one of them was the evolution of the ARE. And I think it's, as I'm sure you can attest to, it's evolved quite a bit over the decades that it's been in existence, and it continues to evolve and keep up with. And as you said, they're really on the cutting edge of what's going on.
Right.
There's just
at
they
one
have their
time
finger
it
on
was a
so many
mom and
different
pop
things.
kind of,
Right.
organization, but the energies of the ARE and of Edgar Cayce and all the people involved in it is taking it way beyond. It's a global conduit, and
Right.
that's what I think it was meant to be.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned that kind of mom pop, that very community and homely vibe that the ARE really has, as it's evolved over the years and expanded and really reached in so many different directions to offer their services to as many people as possible. It hasn't lost that real homey vibe, that real family feeling that you get when you attend a conference or
No.
when you come to visit in Virginia
And,
Beach.
and I think it's because the people involved are very spiritually based, not religiously, spiritually based, and so that spiritually based, intuitively based, psychically based energy builds community.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, Carol, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I really appreciate you giving us your time and, of course, sharing your incredible
Well, it
wisdom
was
when it
fun.
comes to psychic and intuitive abilities.
Well, thank you. It was fun. I enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Carol, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Don't forget to register to see Carol present live in Virginia Beach at the ARE in September. You can register at edgarcayce.org/conferences. On behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment and MoreTalk.tv, I'm your host, Britton Bickerstaff, reminding you, as Casey said, to make the world a better place simply by living in it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Much love. And now it's time for the thought for the day here on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And joining us to read the thought for the day today and share in his own thoughts is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections.
Hi, Brent. Great to see you again. Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, my pleasure. And if you can go ahead and read the thought for the day today and share your own personal thoughts on it.
I'd be happy to. This thought comes from reading 830-3. Hence, as has been given, know yourself, in whom you believe. Not of earthly, not of material things, but mental and spiritual, and why. And by keeping a record of self, not as a diary, but your purposes, what you have thought, what you have desired, the good that you have done, we will find this will bring physical and mental reactions that will be in keeping with the purposes for which each soul enters a material manifestation. To me, this thought brings me back to, have I set my spiritual ideal? What are my inner desires? And who do I trust to help these desires become manifested? I can apply my effort, but I can't say that I have full confidence and trust in myself to manifest all of this. So I need to go to a higher source of information and help with all of these things. And I think as I do that, it will help to guide my mental thoughts, and my physical manifestations will result from that. When he talks about, keep a record of self, Not so much as a diary. I went to the store today, got some more peanut butter or whatever it is that I was doing today. But how did I feel about going to the store? What were my thoughts when I was in the store? What were my reactions to the individual that was checking me out? Who threw my avocado in the bottom of my shopping bag? How did I react to all of that? Um, and I think those are important. You know, did I bless that person or curse the person? When that came about. Do I have to start bagging my own groceries? What was my inner reactions to all of that? And that may sound like silly stuff, but we go through that stuff all day long.
Right.
And how are we feeling on the inside? Are we feeling peace and enjoyment? Or are we feeling hassled and frazzled? Um, I think those are the things that we really need to reflect on. When we lie down at bed at night and say, well, how'd you do today, Bill? Well, sometimes the readings talk about this. You win a few, you lose a few. But if you can reflect on them, then you can say, oh, gee, sorry about that one. Let me try harder the next time, because I was really off base with that one. I think with some of these thoughts, you can really have some fun with them. Sometimes I bring a mirror along with me. That mirror is called my wife, Diana, who, who can say, oh, really blew that one, Bill, and maybe in the future you could handle that a little bit differently. And of course, at that moment in time, I really don't want to hear that, but in the evening, sometimes you can reflect on how did you feel with different things as you went through the day, as you had to do your day-to-day stuff. How did it make you feel? And I think that's a reflection of how close we are with living our spiritual desires and how close we are with our relationship, or being in contact with our relationship with God, the divine forces, which is always there. We may not be mentally there, but it can be a reflection to get back with the program.
Right. Wonderful. Yeah, you raised some great points there. Um, I love this because you talk so much about reflection, and that really resonated with me. Of course, our show is called Reflections, and it's really comes out of the Cayce material. Is that if there's one huge thing that the Cayce material does, as you read each reading and you start to apply what you gather from each reading, it it builds up this reflective life, which I think is one of the most powerful things you can carry with you on your spiritual path, is having a reflective life. And what I love about this reading in particular is that Cayce gives yet another incredible suggestion in this reading, where he talks about keeping a bit of a journal, and he says not as a diary. So he's stressing the importance in this reading, saying that it's not of earthly, not of material things. You don't want to do a play by play, which is your typical diary is loosely based on kind of a play by play of what you went through. Of course, you dive into some of what Cayce talks about here, where he says it's all about the focusing on the mental and spiritual, meaning your reactions to the things, how things made you feel, looking back. How do you feel about it going into it? Were you nervous? Did it give you excitement? And this is an incredible tool that I've been doing over the years, but it gives me focus again. I love going over the readings more because it reminds me that maybe I've strayed from writing down what I'm going through. Not so much what physically is happening, but what my mental patterns are. And the beauty, I think, of doing something like this is, a month down the line, a year down the line, 10 years down the line, you can look back at this and you can see that, okay, you'll realize that it's not so important that I was going to the grocery store doing that this day. It's the most important thing, which is why Cayce gives us this suggestion to keep this sort of journal, is that, okay, this made me angry in that moment. This caused this reaction. And then, a week later I had the same reaction. It's happening. These patterns, what you do is you get to see this big picture of basically an analysis of yourself. I mean, that's what he says. He says you're keeping a record of yourself, which is one of the most powerful practices that you can do, because you may not be able to figure out why you react to something, But if you look back and you see 20 journal entries over the past year where the same thing keeps happening, you can say, okay, here's what my mental state is, here's what my emotional state is, here's what I was going through, and you can plot out the patterns, and it can do incredible things to help you work with what you're going through on a mental and emotional level, which, as Casey stressed, that's what's building our physical level. It's one thing to have a diary that looks at all the physical stuff, but to have that in front of you that says, this is what I was thinking on this day, this is what I was reflecting on, this is how I felt. Imagine how powerful that could be for an individual to change their life.
You talk about a wonderful tool that you're using, taking a look at your mental patterns. I like that expression, your mental patterns. What a way to get to know yourself.
Yeah.
'Cause your mental patterns, I think, are a reflection of what your inner spiritual desires are. And those mental patterns are also going to manifest your physical life.
Right.
And it's such a powerful tool, an active tool, if you just do that. A wonderful challenge to people, and I'm saying this really for myself, is, okay, Bill, write down on a day-to-day basis what your mental patterns were like through the day. Maybe a short section of his, the guy dropped my avocado, what was my reaction? What was my mental pattern? And take a look at that over a 30-day period of time. And I think we'd get a tremendous reflection of what we're manifesting physically. Thank you for that. That's a wonderful tool.
Yeah, of course. Well, Bill, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today with us on the show. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Oh, it's great to be here, Brett. Have a great day today.
Thank you. You too.